Hi everyone, welcome to this video where we talk about one of the new features introduced in Cisco Secure Firewall version 7.0. My name is Dinesh Mudgil and I work as a technical marketing engineer with Cisco Security Business Unit. This is one in the series of many videos created to discuss and demonstrate the new features in 7.0. In this video, we talk about SAML authorization support for Remote Access VPN on Cisco Secure Firewall. Given the organizations gradually shift their focus from an on-prem to cloud deployments, SAML has proven to be an effective user authentication and authorization method. SAML not only provides improved user experience by having users sign in only once to access multiple resources, it also delivers increased security by the virtue of performing authentication at a single point, that is, at a secure identity provider. While Cisco Secure Firewall has supported SAML authentication since 6.7, the latest release 7.0 brings in authorization support for Remote Access VPN. With this feature, we can configure user attributes that are part of SAML assertions within the AAA and DAP framework. SAML authorization provides us a mechanism to interpret SAML assertions which can then be consumed for authorization or policy selection purposes. Additionally, this feature removes any dependency that a deployment might have on local or external authentication servers. In terms of configuration, it's a two-step process. In the first step, the SAML assertion attributes are configured on the identity provider, and later, the SSO provider is configured as an authentication server within the Remote Access VPN connection profile. Please note that the SSO provider in this case is configured as an authentication server and not as an authorization server. Talking about the prerequisites for this feature, this is currently only for FMC managed FTDs, and both the FMC and FTD must be on 7.0 release. This release adds support for this feature via UI as well as REST API. To leverage this feature, either AnyConnect Apex or Plus or VPN only license is required, and base license must allow export control functionality. This feature brings support for user attributes within the AAA and Dynamic Access Policy framework. These attributes are delivered in SAML assertions to the Cisco Secure Firewall. From the configuration perspective, these attributes are configured on the identity provider as a name-value pairs and are parsed as strings. Once the Cisco Secure Firewall receives these attributes, these are made available to the Dynamic Access Policy feature so that they can be used when defining selection criteria within a DAP record. In the DAP table, the SAML attributes are represented in the format like AAA.saml.department equals sales, where sales is the name of department that the user is part of. And within the DAP configuration, it appears as the following. Now, in case of additional attributes that need to be delivered in SAML assertions, we also support multi-valued attributes, and the Dynamic Access Policy table is indexed accordingly. SAML authorization also allows you to leverage member of AD attributes. These attributes are processed similar to the way Cisco Secure Firewall handles them if they are received through an LDAP query. In this case, all the group names will be represented by the common name attribute of a distinguished name. Note that these can be multi-valued attributes as well. Custom SAML assertions can be matched in a dynamic access policy to provide fine-grained access control. There's a special type of attribute called Cisco Group Policy, and the SAML assertion will be used to determine the group policy to be applied to the Remote Access VPN session. Let's take a look at a typical remote access VPN deployment that leverages SAML for authentication and authorization. For the demonstration purposes, we'll be using Duo as our SAML identity provider. The deployment consists of an end user running AnyConnect VPN client, Cisco Secure Firewall where the remote access VPN connection will be terminated, Cisco Duo Access Gateway that acts as a SAML identity provider, an on-prem directory that holds the database of the remote access VPN users, and finally, Duo Cloud Service accessed via a Duo admin portal that is associated with our Cisco Secure Firewall and Duo Access Gateway. The traffic flow in such a deployment begins with an AnyConnect client initiating an SSL VPN connection to the Cisco Secure Firewall, and it is configured for the authentication with Duo Access Gateway. Thus, the DAG redirects the embedded browser in the AnyConnect client to itself for the SAML authentication. Once the client enters the credentials, a SAML authentication request is built and is issued from the Secure Firewall to the Duo Access Gateway. The Duo Access Gateway leverages the integration with an on-site Active Directory to perform primary authentication for the AnyConnect clients. It also retrieves the attributes based on the configuration for the authorization. Once the primary authentication is successful, Duo Access Gateway sends a request to Duo Security over TCP port 443 to begin two-factor authentication. The client is then presented with Duo Interactive Prompt and the user completes Duo two-factor authentication. Duo receives an authentication response and returns the information to the Duo Access Gateway. Then, Duo Access Gateway builds a SAML authentication response which contains SAML token and assertions and responds to Cisco Secure Firewall. Finally, Cisco Secure Firewall interprets those SAML assertions from the identity provider and based on that information allows or restricts access to the remote access VPN user. For the demonstration purposes, AnyConnect and the initial DAP configuration is already done on the Cisco Secure Firewall. For more details on the DAP configuration, you can refer to Dynamic Access Policy video on our Cisco Secure Firewall YouTube channel. We begin by reviewing the Duo admin portal configuration. For SAML authentication and authorization, we configure Cisco Secure Firewall as an application which is a generic service provider Duo Access Gateway. We configure service provider name as Cisco Secure Firewall. Now, based on tunnel group configuration on Secure Firewall, the entity ID and the assertion consumer service URL are configured on the Duo portal. Next, within the SAML response section, we configure name ID attribute field, which is an identity provider attribute that identifies user to service provider, that is our Cisco Secure Firewall. We will be using mail as an attribute in this example. Then we configure send attributes field and select all to send all the attributes to the service provider. This brings us to the most relevant field in this configuration, that is map attributes. This field associates the identity provider attribute to an appropriate SAML response attribute. In our case, we will configure department as an identity provider attribute that is retrieved from the authentication server, which is our AD server, and we map it with SAML response attribute that is Cisco_group_policy. Thus, any VPN user that is part of a particular department, say marketing, will be mapped to a corresponding Cisco group policy named marketing, which is already defined on Secure Firewall. Thus, the authorization will be performed based on this mapping. Lastly, we click on Save Configuration. In this section, we focus on Duo Access Gateway. To begin with, we navigate to the authentication source and make sure the binding with the AD is successful. The first entity relevant to SAML authorization on Duo Access Gateway is Attributes field. This defines what all attributes that can be retrieved from the on-prem directory server. In our demo, we will use SAM account name, mail, and department. Next is Search Attributes field that defines the attributes which will be used to retrieve username for the authentication and authorization. We will use SAM account name and mail as our search attributes. Once the configuration is done, we click on Save Settings. The last section focuses on Cisco Secure Firewall Management Center configuration. In our demo, we have a tunnel group called Secure Access, which has default group policy associated to it. The users from different departments will connect to this tunnel group, and corresponding group policy will be applied based on the SAML authorization. We've also created two different group policies that have different split tunnel ACL for differentiated access. The sales group policy has split tunnel access list called sales_access, and likewise for the marketing group policy, we have marketing_access as the split access list. Next, we navigate to Dynamic Access Policy section, select the existing DAP and create a DAP record for the marketing users. We give it a priority of 5 and configure a custom message that confirms the user has hit a particular DAP record. In this case, marketing user verification successful. Within the AAA criteria, we navigate to SAML criteria, click on Add SAML criteria and define the name of the attribute as SAM account name and the value as Mike, and click Save and save again. Similarly, we create another DAP record for the sales user, give it a priority of 5 and configure a custom message. Again, we navigate to SAML criteria within the AAA criteria, click on Add SAML criteria and define the name of the attribute as SAM account name and the value of the attribute as SAM, and click Save and save again. Then we click on Deploy, Deployment, select our firewall to push the changes. In the meanwhile, we log into the AD server and verify that the user Mike is indeed part of marketing department. This can be verified by double-clicking on the user and navigating to the Organization tab. And likewise, we confirm that the user Sam is part of Sales department. Now that the deployment is successful, we navigate to the remote VPN user and test the connection. On the AnyConnect UI, we enter firebird.tmedemo.local and hit enter. Soon we see embedded browser pop up that prompts for credentials. We enter the credentials of the user Mike, who is part of the marketing department, and click login. This causes a push to be sent to the mobile device, and once we approve it, the connection is successfully established. On the firewall command line, we verify that while Secure Access Tunnel Group has default group policy associated to it, the show output confirms the user has been associated with the marketing group policy. Now we try connecting again, but this time with user Sam. We enter firebird.tmedemo.local and hit enter. We enter Sam's credentials and click login. And once the push is sent, it is approved by the user and VPN is established. Again, we go to the command line and we can verify that this time the user SAM has been mapped to the group policy sales. This confirms the SAML authorization is working as expected. Now moving to troubleshooting section, most common issues observed with SAML authorization are associated with tunnel group or assertion consumer service URL that might not be correct. Or even the attributes that we have assigned might not be matching with the attributes received from an on-prem directory. We can enable VPN syslog in platform settings policy for the managed device, and the corresponding logs can be found at devices, VPN, and then troubleshooting. The managed firewall command line allows you to gather information about SAML authentication pushed by Cisco Secure Firewall Management Center. To get the SAML service provider's metadata for a particular connection profile, we can issue the command show SAML metadata and the name of the tunnel group. To verify the commands are deployed properly, we leverage the command show running configuration web VPN SAML or show running configuration web VPN SAML IDP. In order to retrieve service provider's metadata value outside of the device, we can navigate to the following URL. To verify tunnel group and the associated SAML configuration, we can issue the command show running configuration tunnel group and the name of a particular tunnel group. Lastly, for troubleshooting, the following debug command can be issued. And to stop the debugs, we can issue the command no debug web VPN SAML 255. This concludes our demonstration for SAML authorization. I hope this was informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. Please stay tuned for more videos on the new features added to Cisco Secure Firewall version 7.0. Thank you.